A woman walked into a veterinary clinic, holding a very limp duck in her arms. She placed the duck gently on the examination table, her eyes full of worry. The vet walked over, pulled out his stethoscope, and listened to the bird's chest. After a few moments, he shook his head sadly and said, "I'm sorry, but your duck, Cuddles, has passed away." The woman's face crumpled in distress, and she cried out, "Are you sure?" The vet looked at her with patience and replied, "Yes, I'm sure. Your duck is dead." "Surely you must be mistaken," the woman protested. "You haven't even done any tests. He could just be in a coma or something." The vet sighed, as if this was a familiar conversation, and walked out of the room. A few minutes later, he returned with a large old dog. The dog hopped up on its hind legs, placed its front paws on the table, and sniffed the duck from top to bottom. After a long pause, the dog lowered its head. The vet patted the dog gently, then led it out of the room. A few moments later, he came back with the cat. The cat jumped up onto the table, sniffed the duck carefully from head to foot, and sat back, giving a small meow. It, too, shook its head in disapproval and strolled out of the room. The vet turned to the woman and said, "I'm sorry, but as I mentioned before, this is 100% certifiably a dead duck." The vet turned to his computer, typed something in, and printed a bill. He handed it to the woman, who glanced at the amount, her eyes wide in shock. $150? She gasped. $150 just to tell me my duck is dead? The vet shrugged, not looking up. "Well, if you had just taken my word for it, the bill would have been $20. But with the lab report and the CAT scan, it's now $150. Word for it, the bill would have been $20. But with the lab report and the CAT scan, it's now $150. 21. A police officer pulls over a car for speeding, but since he's in a good mood that day, he decides to let the driver off with just a warning instead of a ticket. He walks up to the car and asks the man, "What's your name?" "Fred," the driver replies. "Fred what?" asks the officer, a bit confused. "Just Fred," the man responds. The officer raises an eyebrow. "Just Fred? No last name?" "Nope," the man says. "I used to have one, but I lost it." The officer, intrigued and a little puzzled, decides to press further. "You lost your last name? How does that happen?" The man sighs and says, "Well, it's a long story, so stay with me. I was born Fred Dingling. Yes, I know, funny last name. The kids at school would tease me all the time, so I kept to myself and studied hard. I was determined to make something of myself." He continues, "Eventually I got older and realized I wanted to be a doctor. I went through medical school, internship, residency, and finally got my degree. So, I became Fred Dingling." The officer listens intently, trying not to laugh. "But then," the man says, "I got bored being a doctor, so I decided to go back to school for dentistry. I got my degree and became Fred Dingling, M.D. D.D.S. "Wow," says the officer. "Seems like you've done a lot." The man nods. "I thought dentistry would be more exciting, but after a while I started fooling around with my assistant. She gave me VD." The officer looks at him, trying to keep a straight face. "So," the man continues, "I was Fred Dingling, M.D. D.D.S. with VD. "Oh no," the officer mutters. "Well, the ADA found out about the VD, so they took away my DDS. I became Fred Dingling, M.D. with VD. The officer chuckles, but the man isn't finished. "Then the AMA found out about the ADA taking away my DDS because of the VD, so they took away my MD. I was just Fred Dingling with VD. The officer is about to burst out laughing, but the man adds one last line. "Then the VD took away my dingling." The officer can't hold it in anymore and walks away, tears in his eyes, laughing hysterically. A boy named Carol had a particularly rough childhood because of his uncommon name. He was constantly teased and ridiculed at school. Over time, he learned to cope with the teasing and eventually married his high school sweetheart. When their first child was born, Carol decided to let his wife choose the name. Inspired by the same spirit that led to his unique name, she named the baby girl Love. Unfortunately, as Love grew up, she endured much of the same teasing her father had because of her unusual name. One day, she stormed home from school, furious, and screamed at her dad, demanding to know why he gave her such a stupid name. To protect his wife, Carol took the blame and apologized. In a fit of rage, Love grabbed her dart gun and shot him before running away. Minutes later, Carol's wife came home and found him lying on the ground. "Oh my God, what happened?" she asked, rushing to his side. With a weak wave, Carol whispered, "Shot through the heart. And you're to blame. Darling, you gave Love a bad name." An extraordinarily handsome man, feeling it was his God-given responsibility to marry the perfect woman and produce children beyond comparison, set out on a mission. After searching up and down the East Coast without success, he decided to head west. Not long after, he met a farmer who had 3 stunningly gorgeous daughters, each of whom took his breath away. Explaining his mission to the farmer, he asked for permission to marry one of his daughters. The farmer, with a knowing smile, said, "They're all looking to get married, so you've come to the right place. Look them over and pick the one you want." The man dated the first daughter, and the next day the farmer asked for his opinion. "Well," said the man, "she's just a wee bit, not that you can hardly notice, but she's pigeon-toed." The farmer nodded thoughtfully and suggested the man date one of the other daughters. So the man went out with the second daughter. The next day the farmer again asked how things went. "Well," the man replied, "she's just a wee bit, not that you can hardly tell, cross-eyed." The farmer again nodded and suggested he date the third daughter. So he did, and the next morning the man rushed in exclaiming, "She's perfect, just perfect. She's the one I want to marry." Without wasting any time, they were wed right away. Months later, the baby was born. When the man visited the nursery, he was horrified. Though the baby was cute, it had the ugliest face he'd ever seen. Panicking, the man rushed to his father-in-law, demanding to know how such a thing could happen, considering the parents. The farmer shrugged and said, "Well, she was just a wee bit. Not that you could hardly tell. Pregnant when you met her." Brave. It was a blistering summer afternoon when a kind-hearted motorist noticed a man pulled over on the shoulder of the highway, struggling with a flat tire. Being the helpful sort, he slowed down and pulled in behind the stranded vehicle. As he approached, the scene told a story all its own. The man by the car was a mess. His face was flushed, tomato red from heat and frustration, with a black grease smear across one cheek where he'd clearly wiped away sweat with oil-stained hands. His shirt, once crisp and white, was now smudged and rumpled, collar askew and tie hanging loosely like a flag of surrender. Standing a few feet away in stark contrast was a woman. Immaculate, hair perfectly in place, not a wrinkle on her blouse. She stood with arms crossed, speaking quickly, sharply, and with enough emphasis to make the air tremble. Her tone was precise, somewhere between a weather report and a courtroom cross-examination. The motorist approached cautiously, offering a friendly wave. "Hey there," he said. "Looks like you're having a tough time. I've changed plenty of tires in my day. Maybe I can lend a hand?" The man looked up with the weariness of a soldier midway through battle. He offered a faint, grateful smile. "Oh, you'd be doing me a real favor," he sighed. "See, my wife's an expert, too. Just ask her." He jerked his thumb toward the still talking woman. "If you can take over all the arguing with her about how the tire ought to be changed, I'll just get on with actually changing the bloody thing." In a quiet convent nestled among the hills, Sister Mary Grace, a sweet, sunny-haired nun with a heart full of kindness, knelt in her room, deep in evening prayer. Her eyes were closed, her voice gentle as she whispered blessings for the poor, the sick, the lonely, and even the wayward souls who left gum in the pews. Suddenly, a golden light filled the room, warm and radiant. She looked up, startled, and there before her stood a shining figure cloaked in light. "My daughter," said God, his voice calm and loving, "you have pleased me greatly. Your devotion is pure, your prayer selfless. You ask nothing for yourself, only for others. I have come to commend you and to grant you one wish." Sister Mary Grace gasped. "Oh, Father, thank you. But I'm truly happy. I do what I love. The church cares for me. I have everything I need. There must be something," God insisted gently. "Some small desire, some wish of the heart." She hesitated. "Well, there is one thing," she admitted. "Name it." Her brow furrowed. "It's those blonde jokes," she said softly. "They're hurtful, not just to me, but to blondes everywhere. They make us sound silly and foolish. Could you stop them?" God smiled and raised a glowing hand. "Consider it done. From this moment on, blonde jokes are erased from the minds of all humankind." Sister Mary Grace smiled, her heart full. "But," God added, "isn't there something else I could do, just for you?" She blushed. "Well, there is one tiny thing. It's not important, though. Hardly worth your time." "Please," God said. "I insist." She glanced down, then back up at the divine. "It's the M&Ms, she said with a sigh. "They're just so hard to peel." Every weekday morning in the heart of Manhattan, a well-dressed CEO of a major bank strolled to the corner of the street, where a humble shoeshine man worked his trade with pride. The CEO would sit on the chair, open the Wall Street Journal, and let the man work his magic, buffing the leather to a mirror-like shine. It became their unspoken morning ritual. One sat in silence with financial headlines, the other quietly polishing with practiced care. Then one morning, as he was working on a particularly scuffed pair of loafers, the shoeshine man glanced up and asked casually, "Sir, what do you think of the stock market situation?" The CEO looked over the top of his paper, slightly amused. "Why are you interested in that?" he asked, with a trace of condescension. "Well," the shoeshine man said, "I've got $1 million invested in your bank, thinking of moving some of it into stocks." The CEO blinked. "Wait, what's your name?" "John Smith, H.," the man replied, shrugging like it was no big deal. Later that morning, back at the bank, the CEO marched straight into the major accounts department. "Do we have a client named John Smith, H.?" he asked. The manager checked the system and looked up with surprise. "Yes, sir. He's one of our most valued clients. Has just over $1 million sitting in his account." The CEO stared for a moment, then turned on his heel and strode back out. The next Monday, at the bank's prestigious board meeting, he stood before the directors and proudly introduced his unlikely guest of honor. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we all know Mr. Smith as the gentleman who shines our shoes so immaculately, but today we recognize him as more than that, a man of discipline, of vision, and one of our most esteemed clients. I invited him to share his remarkable life story. I believe we can all learn something." Polite applause echoed as Mr. Smith stepped forward. He cleared his throat. "I came to this country 50 years ago, fresh off a ship from Europe. I had nothing but the shirt on my back and a name nobody could pronounce. So I changed it. Smith. John S-" He paused, smiling faintly. "I was starving. No job, no help, just a dream. Then one day, I found a coin on the sidewalk, just enough to buy a few apples. I could have eaten them, but I sold them instead. Made a profit, bought more apples, sold those too." Heads around the table nodded. "When I had a few bucks, I bought a second-hand shoeshine kit, worked long hours, saved every penny, No nights out, no fancy meals. Bread and cheese were enough. I kept going. Got better gear. More customers. Eventually, I bought a chair so people could sit comfortably. My business grew. Years later, when another shoe shiner on a better corner retired, I had saved enough to buy his spot. The room was silent now, impressed by the humble grind. I never spent a dime on luxuries, just worked, saved, built something. He took a deep breath. And then, 3 months ago, my sister, who was a whore in Chicago, passed away and left me $1 million. On a warm afternoon, deep in the heart of a reservation, an old native chief sat peacefully in his weathered hut. Smoke curled lazily from his ceremonial pipe, rising toward the wooden beams above. His name was Chief Two Eagles. Wise, observant, and old enough to have seen the world change more than once. Across from him sat 2 government officials, suits crisp and notebooks at the ready. They had come on behalf of some agency or another, hoping to gather insight from the elder who had lived through nearly a century of history. One of the men leaned forward, adopting the tone reserved for interviews and photo ops. "Chief Two Eagles," he began, "you've lived nearly 90 years. In that time, you've witnessed the white man arrive and settle these lands, fight wars, build cities, create technologies. You've seen progress, and the problems that came with it." The chief gave a slow, knowing nod, his expression unreadable. The official continued, "With all you've seen, both the advances and the destruction, what, in your opinion, was the white man's biggest mistake?" For a long moment the chief said nothing. He simply looked at the men, quietly, steadily, letting the silence settle like dust. Then, with a voice as calm as a still river, he replied, "When the white man found this land, natives were running it. No taxes, no debt, plenty of buffalo, plenty of beaver, women did all the work. Medicine man was free. Indian man spent all day hunting and fishing, and all night making love." He paused, took a long draw from his pipe, and exhaled slowly. Then he leaned back with a twinkle in his eye and a sly smile. "Only the white man? Dumb enough to think he could improve a system like that." Lush, ivy-covered private school nestled on the edge of Silicon Valley, Miss Langford, an enthusiastic third-grade teacher with a passion for shaping young minds, decided it was time her students learned about compassion. "Class," she said, folding her hands gently, "today we're going to talk about those less fortunate than ourselves. I want each of you to write an essay about a poor family. Think about how they live and what they might need." 20 pairs of eyes blinked at her, mostly from behind designer glasses. Little Chloe Kensington Blythe, seated near the window and wearing a velvet headband that matched her shoes, nodded thoughtfully. She uncapped her pastel pink fountain pen and got to work. The next morning, the students took turns reading their essays aloud. When it was Chloe's turn, she stood with practiced poise, cleared her throat, and began to read in a clear, sincere voice. "Once upon a time," she began, "there was a very poor family. The father was poor, the mother was poor, the children were poor." Miss Langford smiled. So far, so good. Chloe continued, "The nannies were poor, the pool man was poor, the gardeners were poor, the personal chef, the personal trainer, and the housekeeper were also poor." Now Miss Langford raised an eyebrow. Chloe finished proudly, "It was such a poor family." Once upon a prehistoric time, 3 dinosaurs were lumbering across a scorching desert, grumbling about how long it had been since their last proper meal. Suddenly, the first dinosaur tripped over something sticking out of the sand. He brushed it off with a claw, a strange, golden lamp. The 3 dinos stared at him. "You don't think," said the second one. "Only one way to find out," said the first, and with a dramatic rub, poof! A cloud of smoke burst out, and a genie with flowing robes and sparkling eyes appeared, hovering above the sand. "Dinosaurs!" the genie boomed. "You have awakened me. I shall grant 3 wishes, 1 to each of you." The dinosaurs blinked at each other. Then the first one stepped forward. "I wish for a big, juicy, delicious piece of meat." Bam! Before him dropped the most mouth-watering hunk of prime meat any dinosaur had ever seen. He licked his lips and dove in. Not to be outdone, the second dinosaur stepped forward, eyes gleaming. "I wish for a whole shower of meat raining from the sky." Boom! The sky darkened, and meat began to pour from above. Steaks, ribs, roast legs. It was a carnivore's dream come true. He danced in it, jaws wide open. The third dinosaur puffed up his chest, determined to win this prehistoric wish-off. He tapped his claw to his chin, then grinned. "I've got it. I want a meteor shower." Late one night, in a quiet suburban neighborhood, Marge lay tangled in bed with a man who was definitely not her husband. They had just settled into a cozy, compromising position when the sound of the front door slamming shut echoed up the stairs. Marge froze. The man bolted upright, his eyes wide with panic. "Oh no, that's your husband, isn't it? What do I do?" Marge waved him down frantically. "Shh, don't move. Just stay here. He's probably so drunk he won't even notice. Trust me." The man hesitated, debating whether to make a wild dash for the closet or out the window, but the risk of getting caught half-naked mid-escape felt worse than staying still. So, heart racing, he tucked back under the covers. Moments later, the bedroom door creaked open, and sure enough, Marge's husband stumbled in, reeking of scotch and bad karaoke. "Evening, sweetheart," he slurred, bumping into the nightstand before flopping onto the bed. He yanked the blankets up, grunted, and then stopped. His brow furrowed. He blinked, then he sat up. "Honey," he mumbled, pointing at the end of the bed. "Why are there 6 feet down there?" Marge didn't miss a beat. "Oh, darling, you're so drunk you can't count. Go on, count them again." Still suspicious, but very, very intoxicated, her husband got up, squinting at the feet poking out from under the covers. 1, 2, 3, and 4. He paused, then nodded slowly. "Gosh, you're right, dear. I need to lay off the gin." There was once a stockbroker named Dave who was trying to make a quick buck on a hot penny stock. One afternoon, he was cold calling potential clients, hoping to hook someone in on a low-risk, high-reward stock that was only $1 a share. Finally, he got a bite. "This stock's about to really move," Dave said confidently. "It's only $1 a share. You won't regret it." The voice on the other end was eager. "Buy me 1,000 shares," came the response. Dave's heart raced. It was a small start, but a start nonetheless. He placed the order and hung up, excited to see where this would go. The next day, the stock was at $2. Dave's phone rang. "Dave, you were right. It's already up $1. Buy me 5,000 more shares." Excited by the success, Dave quickly made the purchase, but the next day the stock had soared to $4. The client's voice on the other end was practically singing. "Dave, I want 10,000 more shares." "Done," Dave replied, barely able to contain his excitement. He could see the commission rolling in, too. This was going to be a good month. By the following morning, the stock was at $9. Dave's client, now completely thrilled with his returns, didn't even wait for the next market open. He bolted to the phone, practically breathless. "Dave, sell all my shares. I'm cashing out. I'm rich." Dave was already on the line, ready to finalize the sale, but then he stopped. There was something he hadn't considered. "Wait a second," he said slowly. "To who?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "You were the only one buying that stock." 11. Sarah and Abe were sitting across from each other at a candlelit table, enjoying a lovely dinner to celebrate their 20th wedding anniversary. The conversation was flowing, the wine was smooth, and everything seemed perfect. Until Sarah suddenly grew serious. Abe, she said, her voice trembling slightly, I don't think you love me. Abe, who had been savoring his steak, looked up, clearly taken aback. What? Why would you say that? Sarah wiped a tear from her eye, feeling the weight of the conversation she had tried to have for years. Because if you really loved me, you'd make sure I was taken care of. If anything happened to you, God forbid, I'd need to be provided for, and you still haven't gotten life insurance. Abe let out a deep sigh, his frustration creeping in. Sarah, I've told you 1,000 times, I don't need life insurance. It's like I need a hole in the head. I know your views, Sarah replied, shaking her head. But I've been talking to a couple of my friends recently, and their husbands have life insurance, and they're not even as well off as you. If it's good enough for them, why isn't it good enough for you? Abe leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his face set in determination. I'll tell you why. It's because those guys have been paying high premiums every month for years, and what do they have to show for it? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Sarah, not missing a beat, smiled slyly. So, what if their husbands have been paying for nothing? You've always told me I'm luckier than my friends. Who knows? Maybe this time I'll strike it rich. Early one morning, the Goa police were called to the scene of an unusual discovery on the Goa-Karnataka highway. A large number of dead crows were scattered across the road, and naturally there was immediate concern that the birds had succumbed to the deadly avian flu. A pathologist was brought in to examine the bodies of the crows. After a thorough investigation, the expert confirmed that the cause of death was not avian flu, much to everyone's relief. Instead, it appeared the crows had been struck by vehicles. However, there was one curious detail. Upon closer inspection, the crows' beaks and claws were covered in varying colors of paint. The investigators, puzzled by this, decided to investigate further. They brought in a team of forensic scientists who, after analyzing the paint residues, made a startling discovery. 98% of the crows had been hit by motorbikes, while only 2% had been struck by cars. With no clear reason behind this odd statistic, the investigators decided to bring in an ornithological behaviorist to see if there was any behavioral explanation for the disproportionate number of motorbike deaths. The ornithologist spent several days studying the crows' behavior and their eating habits. He observed that crows, when feeding on roadkill, always assigned a lookout crow to keep watch for approaching danger. This was an instinctive safety measure. Finally, the ornithologist made a humorous and unexpected conclusion. All the lookout crows could easily shout, "Caw!" to warn of an approaching car, but none of them could shout, "Bike!" in time to save their fellow birds. A rabbi and a priest hadn't seen each other in over a year. When they finally met up, the rabbi noticed something right away. "Wow, you've put on some weight since last time," the rabbi said. The priest chuckled, patting his stomach. "Yeah, I've been trying something new. It's a technique I came up with. You go to a restaurant, eat as much as you can, and when the bill comes, you just tell him you've already paid." The rabbi raised an eyebrow. "But the waiter won't believe you, right?" The priest grinned. "Of course he won't. That's when you pull out the big guns. You tell him how dare he doubt a man of faith. Works every time, and you can leave without paying." The rabbi was impressed. "Very nice. I'll have to try that." Later that day, the rabbi went to his favorite kosher restaurant. He was famished, so he ordered 5 plates of food. After finishing them, the waiter brought over the bill. The rabbi looked at the waiter and confidently said, "Oh, I already paid." The waiter, a little confused, responded, "I'm pretty sure you didn't, sir." The rabbi stood tall and said, "Do you know who I am? I'm a rabbi. How dare you doubt a man of faith? I told you, I already paid." The waiter, a bit flustered, replied, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry, sir. It must be a misunderstanding. You're all set." A few minutes passed, then 15, 30, 45 minutes went by and the rabbi was still sitting at the table. Finally, the waiter couldn't help himself and approached the rabbi. "Excuse me, sir, but why are you still here?" The rabbi looked up at him with a calm smile and said, "Well, I'm just waiting for the change." Sophie, a traditional Italian woman, had just gotten married and was still a virgin. On her wedding night, she was staying at her mother's house, feeling nervous. Sensing her daughter's anxiety, her mother reassured her. "Don't worry, Sophie. Luca is a good man. Go upstairs, and he'll take care of you." Sophie took a deep breath and went upstairs. When Luca took off his shirt, revealing a hairy chest, Sophie quickly ran back downstairs and said, "Mama, Mama, Luca's got a big, hairy chest." Her mother calmly replied, "Don't worry, Sophie. All good men have hairy chests. Go upstairs. He'll take good care of you." So up Sophie went again. This time, when Luca took off his pants, she saw his hairy legs. Once again, she rushed downstairs, saying, "Mama, Mama, Luca's got hairy legs." "Don't worry, Sophie," her mother said. "All good men have hairy legs. Luca's a good man. Go upstairs and he'll take good care of you." With more reassurance, Sophie went back upstairs. When Luca took off his socks, she noticed that he was missing 3 toes on his left foot. Sophie ran downstairs, horrified. "Mama, Mama, Luca's got a 1.5 feet." Her mother, unfazed, replied, "Stay here and stir the pasta. This is a job for Mama." A man was bragging to his buddy about a wild night he had with a set of twins. His friend, curious and slightly skeptical, leaned in and asked, "Wait, how do you even tell them apart?" The man smirked and replied, "Oh, it's easy. Becky has pink fingernails." He paused for dramatic effect, then added with a sly grin, "And Tom has a big package." A businessman was feeling unwell, so he decided to pay a visit to his doctor. After running a few tests, the doctor looked at him and said, "Well, it must be your diet. What kind of greens do you eat?" The man replied, "Well, to be honest, I only eat peas. I hate all other green foods." The doctor was shocked. "Peas? Ha! That's your problem. Eating nothing but peas will surely clog up your system. You'll have to give them up entirely." The man was stunned. "How long do I need to stop eating peas for, Doc?" The doctor solemnly replied, "Forever." The businessman was taken aback, but he trusted the doctor's advice. Sure enough, after giving up peas, his condition improved, and he never ate a pea again. Years later, the businessman found himself at a work convention, enjoying a few drinks. He overheard a rep talking to a bartender. The rep said, "You know, I haven't had a cigarette in 4 years, but tonight I'm gonna light one up." The bartender chimed in, "Ah, that's nothing. I haven't played a game of golf in 3 years. It cost me my first marriage, so I gave it up. But tomorrow, I'll sneak in a quick round." The businessman, feeling a bit tipsy, raised his glass and slurred, "Well, that's nothing. I haven't had a pee in 6 years." At that moment, the bartender jumped up, wide-eyed, and shouted, "Okay, everyone who can't swim, grab a table."